Hello and welcome to What a Guy Wants. We are your hosts, Coach Ali and Coach Yogesh, and this forum is all about shedding light on all things men. And today's discussion is a topic that Yogesh you came up with, which is desexifying the mind. So tell me, Yogesh, what does it mean to desexify the mind?
Yeah, it's not a term we use in our everyday lingo, right? So desexifying the mind, especially for men, comes from the premise that sex is always or predominantly on a man's mind. And then comes in, once we understand that premise or we accept that premise, the other thing then comes up, the question then comes up, is desexifying the mind important? Is it needed? Should I do it? Is it something we need to have a discussion about? Is it something I need to care about? And this is what Ali and I are here today to just put some light on this topic, see if it's relevant for you. And if it is, what can we do?
That sounds great, Yogesh. So when you mean desexify the mind, so what comes up for you? What do you mean when you say when you use the words desexify the mind?
Desexifying means like how when we use a disinfectant, there's an infection and I want to remove it. So desexifying the mind means mind or a thing which is dominated by lust, by objectifying women, mind always proactively thinking about sex and wanting a need and urge to do something about it, be it watch pornography or masturbate or hit out to women to have sex or constantly have that in your mind where you're aroused? Is it desexifying all of that means calming that intensity to a little bit more moderate or lower level where the mind has other things to think about and has a better balance between thinking about sex and doing worldly activities or our responsibilities and our duties.
Okay, so that's really interesting, Yogesh. And the way I think about it is that, and I'm actually going to read some stats out. So there's a
Yeah.
survey in 2015, 98% of men reported internet pornography use in the last 6 months. From a survey in 2018, 99% men reported to have watched pornography. According to a study in 2014, over half of divorces, 56% involved one partner having an obsessive interest in online pornography. And we've come to a stage where it's this world that is telling us that watching pornography isn't a bad thing. And then there's
Yep.
another world that's telling us that no, actually pornography is a bad thing. And when I think about it from my own experience, although it's been quite a few years for me, but I can see, I can spot that cycle, right? Because the way I see it for myself at least is that if I've consumed pornographic content
Yeah.
and in the night I'm sleeping, what happens is that my subconscious mind is like, is trying to store everything that happened in that day, is trying to process all that information. What comes
Yeah.
out of that information is also it's trying to process that porn content. And then it flows into the next day. And again, that mind is already there because it's already been thinking about all that stuff that's come up, the stuff that I watched the previous night. And
Yeah.
it becomes like this cycle. And what happens is that it almost takes, at least I can say, it takes one away from becoming more productive, becoming a more valuable member to society, more important to that, becoming a more valuable person, feeling like a more valuable person in itself.
Yes.
So I feel that I would say I'm in that zone where there can be no amount of pornography that is actually healthy. So that's where I am right now. What are your thoughts, Yogesh?
Yeah, absolutely. I think firstly, thank you for acknowledging it and putting it out there. Sex addiction and porn addiction is a big thing, right? And the thing is, we have to understand it is very easy to fall into these traps and to be addicted to these things. So it takes over your world, firstly. And secondly, it has a very, very strong intensity and momentum to it. So for me, my stance is pretty clear. I was actually part of a no-fap community on Reddit. I don't know if everyone knows about it, but a lot of men, at least, are on that. No-fap means they had a thing where you don't watch porn, you don't masturbate, and some of them even went going towards monk mode where they didn't orgasm. So for them, they were just restraining themselves from sex as much as they can, because a lot of them were in that addictive phase you were talking about, not having a great self outlook at that point of time, not being able to be productive, not actually being responsible and doing the things they promised to people around, and their work, life, relationships, all of it suffered through it. So I've personally in my life understood how addictive this can be. And for me, the stance also is going towards no fap, which is no porn, no masturbation, and have partnered intercourse rather than orgasming and masturbating on by our own self. All of that actually causes a lot of low self-worth to men, especially when they do it on watching porn and to a screen. So the association is that there is no human being here, just a screen around here, and that's all.
That makes a lot of sense, Yogesh, because it's in the end of the day, if it's in front of the screen, it's not real. Right? If you're alone, it's not real.
Yep. Yep.
And again, with pornography, one of the biggest drawbacks is that the expectations become so unrealistic that
Yeah.
the real experience of sex itself is not enjoyed because the expectations are so high. And again, it's leading to, it's one of those things. It's exactly like, when we're on Instagram and we're like going from one reel to another and we're just keep on going. And it's like, we want to look in our mind, we're telling ourselves, I want to find that one perfect reel that will satiate me. And then once I'm satiated, then I will close it down. But we never get to that perfect reel. And pornography is exactly the same, right? We're just like in today's day and age, it's like you can just it's like reels, and we can just go from one video to another video to another video. And
Yeah.
again, it's like, because it's not real,
Yeah.
it's not going to provide any satisfaction. And it's just more addictive. It tells you that I'm real, but actually it's not real.
Yeah.
None of it is actually real.
True.
All of it is actually acted out. It's all made up, and it's made up in such a way that puts our expectations there. And at the same time, it will also have a really big impact on men and how they think that they should be performing
Yeah.
when they're actually in a relationship, when they're actually having sex, and the amount of pressure that puts on men and the expectations. So yeah, this is what's coming
Yeah.
for me right now.
Absolutely. It's completely distorted. It's completely distorted how a woman's body should look, how sex should be, what size a man should be, how easy it is to have sex with women. All of it is very, very distorted. And it actually has huge levels of objectifying women in its core, and also disillusionment in its core. So for me, I think the answer has been very, very clear. No porn. That's never beneficial, like you just said. And I think forget porn now, once we've actually got clear about it. It's actually understanding and seeing how much sexual thoughts and arousals are dominating our minds. So just because you brought up stats, I have a stat here. In 2001, there was a meta-analysis of 150 studies done, and they found a conclusive result that men had more frequent sexual thoughts, fantasies, and spontaneous arousals. For instance, one study they looked at reported that nearly all men have that, 91%, compared to 50%, 52% of women. So I was thinking about it, and this is true. I can see it with me, I can see it with my clients and how they have had their relationships in their dating scenes as well. And one of the biggest scientific reasons behind that is testosterone. So the fact that I can grow a beard, a thick beard, where men are more physically stronger than women is because of testosterone. But testosterone also has a high sex drive inherently in it. And there are a lot of other natural predispositions to this. But the one thing is that men have a higher sexual drive on average, and they get aroused faster. So it's 0 to 100 way quicker than, say, an average woman who would take a little bit more wooing, having being invested in her, feeling good about it, and so forth, versus a man who's more visual, boom, aroused. So once we know the nature of the mind and how scientifically a man and I am programmed, if I am going to be exposed to a lot of sexual thoughts, porn, all of these things, if I consciously allow it to enter my mind, it's going to run my mind. It's going to create havoc, and it's going to take me to that direction at all times. What do you think?
No, absolutely. I feel that yeah, absolutely. It's what we put into our mind, right? Like the input is equal to our output. And
Yeah.
eventually what happens is that it's the main game is played in our subconscious mind. And our subconscious mind, what's happening in our subconscious mind is dependent upon what we're putting into our conscious mind all the time. If we're
Yeah.
going to put in porn and all that type of content, right,
Yeah.
into our mind, that's going to go into our subconscious mind. And then we're going to wake up the next day and we're like, oh, by the way, I don't understand, why do I think this way? Why
Yeah.
are my thoughts this way? Why? And then we end
Yeah.
up judging ourselves for thinking that way or being that way. Why am I
Yeah.
like this?
Absolutely.
And something that is coming up for me right now, and if for somebody who's hearing it, is that please note that this discussion is to bring awareness to these topics, to bring awareness to all things men. And the reason why I brought up that 90% stat is purely because to let you know that you're not alone, that
Yeah.
no one is alone. And this is not to be looked at as from a point of shame.
Yeah.
And this is to be looked at from a point of what do you think is, if you are engaging in porn, if you are engaging in activities that actually do not make you happy, it's just instant gratification. If you're
Yeah.
engaging in those activities, then I want you to think about what it's doing to your life. So just think about what it's doing to you on a regular basis. And again, it's one of those things where it's not like if you decide to change, it's not like it happens overnight. It's like a step
Yes.
by step. So again, you know, please do not take this with judgment. Take this with, okay, what is one step that I can make to make it better? Because the pressure is huge that, oh, I have to transform and change everything in one day. And that's pretty much bullshit. It doesn't happen. It doesn't work. It's not a long-term solution. And so take it step by step. What is the small thing I can do? So for example, if you're addicted to porn and you watch porn in the night, how can you make porn more inconvenient? So let's just say that afternoon, normally you're at work. So make it afternoon, you're busy or at work, you don't have time to watch porn. There is no way you can actually watch porn. So make it difficult for yourself to watch porn. So change the timing around.
Yeah.
And definitely this doesn't mean that you actually watch porn at work. That would get you into trouble. So there's I'm not insinuating anything like that, but you get the hint. So
Yes.
yeah, that's pretty much my two bits. Yogesh, what would you like
Yeah,
to add?
absolutely. Firstly, coming from a space of empathy and love, honestly, from my perspective, how I felt after indulging in all of these things is I do feel shame. I don't know where it comes from. There is guilt, shame. There's definitely an emptiness attached because what happens is there is a lot of power in with men because man, when his reproductive organs, when he has sex and he ejaculates, that semen has the power to have creation. Obviously, he requires that woman and she has that power to hold the child and give birth and so forth. But that creative power is very, very strongly innate in that man's semen. So there is a bit of emptiness and a lack of energy that comes up once we ejaculate and masturbate, all of it. And porn just accentuates and makes it even more worse. So I feel because of our upbringings, maybe religion, maybe society. I'm not sure exactly pinpointed where it comes from, but there is a bit of shame and guilt attached to it. For me, I've tried to shed away a lot of shame around sex because there was too much of shame attached to it. But I also understand now a lot of it is intuitively telling me it doesn't make me feel good if I masturbate, if I release my energy. You can see it, it happens. This is Eastern philosophies and our scriptures and all of it saying it. But even in our Western, very, very scientific competitive sports, they say it's a big World Cup on. Listen, get away from your families, get away from your spouse, put your head in the game. Your focus has to be on the match and stay away from it. Like, refrain from having sex, abstinence. So if they are doing it, it means they understand how energy works, how mood works, how emotion works. And if that thing, the most highest competitive sports person who's making millions a week is doing it, then there's obviously some insight to it.
Oh wow, I didn't know that actually. That's a pretty awesome stat, Yugesh. And something that you said about shame, and weirdly enough, I just had this already on my screen, and it says that anything that we only do in absolute isolation triggers shame,
Yeah.
and it relates to so much of that. And again, it's like just reiterating this again for anyone listening. Is that again, if this is something that you indulge in, one step at a time, it's not about the entire transformation. And at the same time, if you're looking at it from guilt is more like a manufactured emotion. The guilt comes afterwards that makes you feel bad. So what is that one thing? So a life can only be lived in the moment. What is the one thing that you can change in that moment? It's only about that one thing that will lead to another thing and another thing. So that would be just another tip, and I just can't, reinforce it enough, because I guess that it also comes from my own past, where I'm just thinking about like how much shame I'd associated with it, and I'm like, it makes me a bad person. It makes me so many bad things, but those bad things do not help change it. I guess that when I started looking at it from a perspective of love and compassion, that's where it changes it, which things started to shift actually. So that's coming up for me. Yogesh, anything else coming up for you?
Yep, I think what you just said, being the idea behind having these discussions is that however accomplished a coach might be, however sorted or disciplined a person might be, that has also been a problem for that person. It's also been a challenge for them. So be kind to yourself, but also don't choose the easiest option at all times, because that easiest option, first ask yourself, is the easiest option now serving you? If it's not serving you anymore, then what can you change? And desexifying the mind is about that. It doesn't tell you, you know what, you can't do it. There's no imposition and no to it. A lot of what I have refrained from is out of my own choice. I chose not to do it. I understood intuitively, doesn't help. There is no one judging me for it. There's no one holding me accountable. There's no one suing me for it. The problem, actually, what is happening is we live in a society, Ali, which is full of sex. Our movies have become very, very sexified. There's actually a show called Sexified on Netflix. I've watched it. I enjoyed it. There are actually our advertisements, reels, promiscuous Insta models, all of everywhere you go, sex sells. The marketers, the economy has understood it. Men are easily aroused. It's fun for them. It's guilty pleasure. Yes, they will indulge in it. They will pay for it, and they will keep watching those kind of movies, kind of shows, and so forth. So it sells, and we've all been guilty of buying into it because it's fun, because everyone's doing it, because it's popular. But for me, the biggest thing I understand and the biggest pain point for me personally becomes dopamine addiction. It means where I want to watch one after another, one reel after another, one Netflix show after another. It just makes me feel as if I'm not in control and something else outside is controlling me. And that something else outside does not even have any functional service, does not even add any value. So something outside can be controlling. Say if when you had your 1-year-old kid, yeah, or little infant baby, and she's crying and you're there for them, or a little kid is hurt and they're asking for your help, and you feel like absolutely pulled towards them, right? I want to do whatever it is for my kid. But at that point of time, that thing outside of you is actually helping you become a little bit more better as a human being. It's service, it's doing something to them, it's actually taking care of them, and so forth. Similarly, if we can just transfer that energy to things which are productive and which are of service and leads to a bit of growth, that makes me happy. But when all of these things come up, the dopamine effect of sex, of porn, of all of these videos, movies, shows is very high. It's very, very addictive. So for me, that means that the game is rigged against you. That if you aren't aware of it, if we aren't having these discussions about it now, there's a downward slope. If I don't do anything about it, I'm not a neutral. I'm actually going a little bit more, sucked a little bit more in the quicksand.
Yeah.
So the point of having these discussions to put out this information is not because it's something new. I think every guy innately knows it. Something shouldn't be doing. He doesn't feel really good about it. But it's actually having a little bit more kinder, safer, nuanced discussion about, listen, we need to climb up the slope, climb up the mountain one by one step after another. You can't climb the whole Mount Everest from the base camp from zero to be at the top. It's unrealistic and it's going to freaking hurt you. You're going to get injured if you try to do it too much on one day. So it's not about, making it to the peak right now. It's not about conquering that whole Mount Everest today, but it is about accepting that, you know what, I'm on a downward slope with this. I am. Let's be very honest. And I'm going to take a step on the other side, which takes a little bit more extra effort because the game is rigged against you.
Absolutely. So, a few beautiful things that came up as you were talking for me is that, there's almost in my mind is more like this real dopamine and there's fake dopamine.
Yeah.
And although it's the same thing, but at the same time, they impact differently upon us. So, like porn, masturbation, all these things are the fake dopamine. It's the type of dopamine where once we get that hit, it is followed by generally a negative emotion of feeling bad, of feeling
Yeah.
not so good enough. And then there's this real dopamine where it's more like going out for a walk, going out for a run, being childlike with your kids, doing something silly, purposely, just having fun. That's like the real dopamine. So these two things come up for me strongly. Another thing that I'm glad you mentioned initially,
Yeah.
Yogesh, was when I say kindness. So kindness is easily misinterpreted as being soft, but kindness is not a soft thing. Kindness is equal to getting your child vaccinated, although you know it's going to hurt them, but it's
Yeah.
actually good for their longer term. That is
Yeah.
kindness. So kindness to oneself is actually as just for that moment choosing not to indulge in porn. That is called kindness. So sometimes
Wow.
kindness is a word that it's almost seen as soft, and it's
Yeah.
almost like seen in a way where in a negative light, but kindness can mean so many things. And kindness can be, for me, it's more like I am choosing not to have a soda right now, and that is being kind to myself and my body.
Yeah.
So again, it's one of those things that are coming up for me. And Yugesh, as much as like I know that our discussion can go on for another hour, so I'm becoming a bit conscious of time.
Yeah.
So before we come to an end, what are your final thoughts?
Honestly, my final thought wants to be a play and an acknowledgement of what you just said. It's actually very true. When I go work out and I feel good about it, that is the reward of an effort I've put in, and an effort which is slightly outside my comfort zone, and I'm doing it, which makes me a better version of myself, right? So it's a little bit of the satisfaction of the work I've put in. And there is actually a term, I forget the author who wrote it, but I read it in this book where it speaks about stress, which is the bad stress. And another topic, another concept he talks about is eustress. Basically, the other one, that stress is spoiling your health. It's hurting you, where your mind is overthinking, you're overworking, and basically you're in absolutely zero battery. Okay. The eustress is basically the stress of taking on something which is challenging you. So committing to a podcast is one of the challenges for me, being in front of a camera. But it is a challenge which is, you know what, at that moment it feels heavy. Like the big dumbbell or barbell I'm holding. But when I finish it and it's done, I'm like, damn, you know what? I just built up some muscles and I feel amazing about it. So the endorphins that I get from it, that's also a dopamine hit, but it's coming from doing the work, which is not just any work, not just working like a crazy person and no intention, but it's the eustress, which is just challenging you enough to take the next step. So the porn, the masturbation is the reward without any effort. It's one click, all of that. And the world is going towards that, wherein one click and the delivery is here, one click and my food is here, one swipe and I can get a Tinder match or a match on another dating app. So that all builds up entitlement. And that is a recipe for disaster and heartbreak, because I'm used to getting all the success, all the dopamine, all the happiness without doing the work. I'm entitled. Versus the eustress is the other stress is when I do it and then I earn the dopamine. And it doesn't mean that as inherently I need to earn something because I'm already good enough. But in our everyday activities, once we do in the work, once we take action and we get a reward of that action, or even if we don't get the reward of that action, taking the action helps us feel good. So, what action are you going to take is going to define who you are going to be now, and is going to define your future. So, desexifying the mind for me is a no brainer, is the action which is slightly outside your comfort zone. It means channeling the energy towards reading a book, going out in the mountains, in the nature, going for a walk, lifting at the gym, whatever your volition is. But that is the one which is going to make you a better human being and a little bit more contented, joyful man.
Absolutely. That's beautiful, Yogesh. And desexifying, there's always what you said was profound, that there's always, when we earn something, we value something, and there's a sense of entitlement. The value can be very different. And again, desexifying the mind is what I would like to say is more of a journey than a destination. It's not a destination, it's more of a journey. And that's what I would like to end with. And I hope you've enjoyed this content. And again, one of the things is that it's been like this is our one of the first few recordings, and I never thought I would cringe on the fact that I'd be doing a topic like this or covering a topic like this even a few months ago.
Yeah.
So again, it's building my own muscle as well. So glad to be doing this, and thank you for
So
hearing us. And more than anything, it's so important for us to get your feedback, to hear your comments, to hear what's coming up for you, bad, good, the ugly. Let us know so that we actually understand even more and we can create better content. And share your comments. What do you think about desexifying the mind? What do you think about watching pornography? What do you think about masturbation? What do you think? Because what you think is important. Have an awesome one. Take care. And it's all for now. Until next week, it's bye from myself and Yogesh. Thank you. If this video has benefited you in any way, then don't forget to hit the like, share, and subscribe buttons. As always, this space is completely yours, so please feel free to share your thoughts and your challenges in the comments below. After all, you never know whose life you might be impacting through that little share of yours. Have a super awesome day.